This podcast is supported by FX's English Teacher, a new comedy from executive producers of What We Do in the Shadows and Baskets. English Teacher follows Evan, a teacher in Austin, Texas, who learns if it's really possible to be your full self at your job while often finding himself at the intersection of the personal, professional, and political aspects of working at a high school. FX's English Teacher premieres September 2nd on FX. Stream on Hulu.
Welcome to What She Said, the heartbeat of Canadian women's voices, with me, your host, Candace Sampson. Here, we dive deep into the raw, unfiltered stories and triumphs of women from coast to coast. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement where empowerment and education collide and where mansplaining is shown the door. We're here to celebrate, uplift, and echo you. So get cozy, tune in, and let's embark on this journey together, exploring the rich tapestry of women's lives, their battles, and victories, right here on What She Said. Well, there's just 2 weekends left before school routines kick back into high gear, and it feels like a good time to remind you to take a breath, to just be present with your friends and family. It's easy to get caught up in the rush of organizing and planning for life after Labor Day, but let's all strive to hold on just a little bit longer to this sweet season. Because it only comes once a year, so remember, it's important to savor it instead of mentally rushing into packing lunches and filling out forms. There will be plenty of time for that. So this weekend, a reminder to take in the season and today's show. Here's what's coming up. Leslie Garrett, a distinguished journalist and editorial director of Blue Dot Inc., joins me today. Her influential work has been featured in The Atlantic, The Washington Post, and Good Housekeeping, and she's authored over 15 books, including The Virtuous Consumer, which explores sustainable living. Leslie joins me to discuss the challenges those in the climate space face, the relentless attacks they endure, and the unwavering determination that drives them to continue fighting for our planet. And Brodie is here with some exciting entertainment updates, starting with the riveting story of Jackie Shane, a trans woman and singer from Toronto during the 60s and early 70s, brought to life in a project by none other than Elliot Page. Anne and I are also excited to see Carol Kane in the new film Between the Temples, and I think I'm finally convinced to start watching Only Murders in the Building this season. Next, I'm thrilled to welcome Mary Anne Ivison, host of the podcast Let's Take This Outside. An aspiring outdoor athlete and nature lover, Mary Anne talks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about their connection to nature and how it impacts their performance and everyday lives. We've all tried to cheer up a downcast teen with well-meaning platitudes, but sometimes our attempts can backfire. Aly Pain, our expert on parenting teens, is here to guide us through the pitfalls of what she calls pompom parenting and to offer effective strategies for truly connecting with your teen during tough times. Finally, for fans of Bridgerton, there's a new period drama to captivate your hearts. I'm joined by Anne Radcliffe, a talented writer who has co-authored 3 books with Lynn Morrison, with plans for more in the Crown Jewels Regency Mystery series. We'll discuss the nuances of co-authoring, the inspiration behind the series, and what's next for their intriguing characters. So stay with me as we explore these engaging topics and more right here on What She Said. As the world grapples with unprecedented fires, floods, and extreme weather events, there are those who want you to ignore the evidence before your eyes. This dismissal is exhausting for everyday citizens and downright demoralizing for those who are dedicated to combating climate change. Leslie Garrett is a distinguished journalist and the editorial director of Blue Dot Inc. Her work has been featured in prestigious publications such as The Atlantic, The Washington Post, and Good Housekeeping. She is also the author of over 15 books, including The Virtuous Consumer, which explores how to live more sustainably. Leslie joins me today to discuss the challenges faced by those in the climate space, the relentless attacks they endure, and the unwavering determination that drives them to keep fighting for our planet. Welcome to What She Said, Leslie.
Well, thank you.
So the energy among those working in the climate space has been heavy recently. Can you elaborate on what has contributed to this heaviness and how it has affected the climate movement?
Well, I want to first make clear, I mean, the climate space is not a monolith. There are people working in so many different ways. And I certainly am not its official spokesperson, but I can speak to the fact that it has felt demoralizing. And I think what it boils down to is, those of us who are reading the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, following the international gatherings and seeing the climate science come out, the urgency has been ramping up. I started doing this as a climate reporter about 20 years ago. And the cries for it to be addressed have grown, louder and as I said, more urgent. And it just feels like we haven't been meeting that moment, that the response to it, both politically and culturally, just doesn't reflect that urgency. So you end up sort of feeling this sort of sense of desperation, I guess, like you're screaming and nobody's listening.
Let's touch on politics for a second. How have the political developments, such as the prospect of perhaps a second Trump presidency or a potential Poilievre win, influenced the climate activism community and your work at Blue Dot?
Well, I think it's twofold. On the one hand, I think it really galvanizes us. I think when Trump was elected, I think there was very much a sense of well, I guess we're the heroes we've been waiting for. And there was a lot of kind of real mobilization and activation, which was exciting, but again, just can feel pretty demoralizing when with the sign of a paper, he, opens up drilling in the Arctic or whatever. So, the idea of him getting back in, I mean, there was news reports that he's selling the country off for parts to oil and gas executives. I don't think Poilievre is a Trump. I think Trump is sort of uniquely dangerous, but just the fact that Poilievre is going all in on oil and gas and sort of fighting really good policy. The carbon tax, I mean, it's a shame that it's called a tax. The messaging has been not good, but economists around the world and climate scientists maintain it's a really powerful, effective way to punish the polluters, incentivize less pollution, and reward those of us who don't own oil and gas companies.
Private jets.
Yeah.
You've talked previously about the need for excitement and joy in climate activism, and I don't see a lot of that, unfortunately. So can you share some specific moments or leaders who have inspired, renewed energy and hope when it comes to climate discussions?
There have been policy moments, like I remember when Obama passed, they were called the CAFE standards. They were essentially fuel efficiency standards for vehicles. And overnight, it was as if millions of cars had been taken off the road. And up to that point, I had very much believed that this was a sort of a grassroots driven movement, and that it was going to be us with our reusable water bottles that were going to change the world. And I just saw the scale of change that good, smart policy can create, which isn't to say we shouldn't all try to do what we can. It honestly can feel good to just make choices that are aligned with our values, but it is to just underscore the value of really good policy and our leaders leading the movement as opposed to trying to catch up with us. In terms of sort of where I get inspiration, Greta. I mean, she's remarkable. She's
great.
And in part because the movement has never been about her. It's always been about inspiring the rest of us. Catherine Hayhoe is a Canadian
Also wonderful.
Scientist, incredible, and just leads with such joy. Rebecca Solnit, who's an essayist, a climate activist who I love, who just keeps reminding us like it's not over till it's over. There's Hannah Ritchie she's Scottish, and she works for Our World in Data, and she spends all day just looking at the numbers. And she just came out with a book called It's Not the End of the World, which is essentially a blueprint for how humanity is uniquely positioned right now to create a truly sustainable planet. And I mean, all of that is exciting and shows sort of incredible promise.
I read something recently that I think is sort of fitting here. And it's that, it's easy to get caught up in despair, but when there's uncertainty, there's hope. And we do have a little bit of uncertainty here. So that should instill hope in us. And environmentalist Paul Hawkins has said that we need to reimagine how we do everything. How do you see this concept playing out in practical terms? And what are some examples of reimagined practices?
Yeah, I love Paul Hawken, and that quote of his has been something of a sort of a North Star for me. The whole of it is something along the lines of what an amazing time to be alive, because we get to reimagine how we do absolutely everything. And as you said, there's an uncertainty in that. And unfortunately, I think the more, the poorer leaders we have exploit that. They sort of tap into the sort of the fear, the I'm going to get left out or I'm going to get left behind. But as you say, within that uncertainty, there's an awful lot of promise. I mean, we've seen it. I sat in on a panel discussion with environmentalist Bill McKibben just yesterday, and he says one of the most underreported stories of our time has been this absolute explosive growth of renewable energy. It's beyond what even the most optimistic projections would be. And we're seeing countries, California is now powering it's the 5th largest economy in the world for, hours a day, with entirely on renewable energy. I mean, it's really exciting. And when we sort of think of the downstream effects of that, renewable energy is what is, kind of labor intensive. It's going to require a lot of workers to build out the infrastructure for renewable energy. Oil and gas is not. It's sort of manufacturing intensive. So the idea that we can actually put a lot of people to work in this new economy, and let's not forget that burns clean, it's carbon free. So it's not only, kind of better in the immediate, the long-term effects are actually slowing down climate change. And our kids breathing cleaner air than we have been, or even their grandparents. So there's a lot of excitement. Electric vehicles, there's been a lot of kind of misinformation around those. Electric vehicles are here to stay, and range is only getting better. Battery storage is only getting better. I mean, we're undergoing just a real technological kind of renaissance that is going to move us into this reimagined world.
Well, I want people who are looking for these, pieces of hope to hold on to when it comes to the climate to be able to find you and Blue Dot. So how can they do that? What's the best way for them to keep involved and keep informed?
Well, Blue Dot, one of the things I love about it, and one of the reasons I got involved, is it's solutions-focused journalism. So that's basically what we do, is we just underscore all these solutions around the world. We have locations all over, including we recently launched Toronto. So I really hope people will go to toronto.blue.living.com. It's local in one sense, but it's Canadian in scope as well. Go to blue.living.com. That's sort of our hub site, and find us on pretty much all the social media platforms at blue.living.
All right. Fantastic. Leslie, we'll have you back again soon. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. Pleasure.
Hi, I'm Michelle Datis, host of Maverick Makers. Every week, I'm meeting entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs who are making it happen. These bold thinkers are taking big risks, are trailblazing the way in their industries and lives, and are changing how things are done or made. You will learn about their journeys, their lessons learned, and their biggest maverick moves to date. Listen to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at maverickmakerspodcast.com.
It's time to find out what's new in entertainment with Anne Brodie. And Anne, I am really excited to talk about the first film this week, Jackie Shane. I'd never heard of her, but wow, am I ever drawn in just watching the trailer.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, she was really, really, really big in Toronto in the 60s and early 70s, I believe. And when I was little, we all heard about her. And a friend of a friend led us into Teen Town where she was performing. So I actually saw her perform. And we were daring one another to go backstage and meet her. But, she was a real enigma. She was just so powerful on stage. She was born a boy and transitioned. And then after this phenomenal success in Toronto, which she couldn't get back in the South where she was from, she just suddenly disappeared, just went dark for like 40 years, and then died. But she had this really intense fame in Canada. And she discovered buses parked outside her gigs from way down in the States, coming all the way up to Toronto just to see her. She was that fiery. And she was elegant. She was beautifully dressed, lots of jewelry and very feminine. And yet this voice of hers, it didn't match, it was so soulful and big. So I hope people go and see this film. It describes her rise to fame in Toronto. She adored Toronto, and that she left and what became of her. And there's only sadly one bit of video of her performing, which is insanity. You can still get her records, but so people should really try to see this. She was a star, a superstar in Toronto.
I think it's worth noting, Elliot Page is behind this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Elliot has been on quite a journey himself. So this must have felt very personal to be telling this story. And one of the parts in the trailer just immediately brought tears to my eyes. And it was when they were reading out her unpublished biography, the words were, "I was born but never lived."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yet, she was so happy in Toronto because people loved her. They allowed her to live, but she had to go and care for her parents. And that was it. She just disappeared. And it was a mystery for a long while. She had nieces who inherited everything. They had no clue that they had an Aunt Jackie. I guess, being the culture that they were in, there was no such thing as trans, or it just seemed horrific. And so they were the ones who got this film going because they couldn't believe what they discovered. It's a great film.
Really, just such a timely story, and so compelling. So yes, I really am looking forward to that. This one, is it in theaters, Anne?
It's in select theaters, yes, sort of limited, and I'm sure it'll be streaming at some point soon.
Oh, it doesn't take long for things to hit streaming anymore.
No, it doesn't. And it's NFB. NFB produced it. So, it will be available for free on their site at some point.
Amazing. Okay. I want to talk about Between the Temples because Carol Kane, I haven't seen her in forever.
We love her. We love her.
Yeah.
She doesn't get enough exposure. And here she is. She's in a lead. And, she's in her 70s playing the romantic interest of Jason Schwartzman, who plays a rabbi in this film Between the Temples. And that has so many meanings. But anyway, so he's in a pickle. He can't get on with his life. He's having a hard time. He even loses his voice, and he can't sing his chants in the synagogue, and he runs away. He runs out of the synagogue. So he meets her in a bar. Turns out she was his music teacher way back when he was little, and they develop a friendship, and they really heal each other. And he's got so much healing to do, and so has she. And the two of them together, they're just magic. I can't believe how great this film is. And, there's so many wonderful bits of comedy. There's dietary humor, a Yiddish rock video. It just goes there, it's just so fantastic. And Schwartzman, wow, he's my new hero. I had no idea.
It looks like such a great film. Now, this one, theaters or streaming?
It's in theaters in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. Here in Toronto, it's TIFF Bell Lightbox. Or,
all right.
excuse me, TIFF Lightbox. No longer affiliated with Bell.
Oh, good to know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Doubles.
Doubles is a study of a father and son, a grown son who lives in Trinidad, and he's really full of himself. He's 104th generation high Brahmin, which is a high caste to be in. But, he's not a good person. He's not a nice person. His father left when he was a baby, and he hears that he's a chef in Toronto. So he comes up to Toronto to ask for money for all the time all the years his father spent away from him, or title to the father's land in Trinidad. I mean, you don't suddenly show up and demand money from someone you don't like and haven't seen in so long. But his father is a real gentle soul, and he has a lot of problems. He doesn't have much money. He lives in a crummy basement flat somewhere, but he has a friend. He works in this diner. He's not the chef, as the son was told. He's a dishwasher, but he's got a woman there who cares for him, a young woman. And their bond is just brilliant. And it's about friendship and this man's stubbornness to become his father's friend. So, he's just filled with disgust for this poor man, and we really dislike our lead. So he's ill. He needs a transplant. The son won't do it and decides to go back to Trinidad. And then there's this wonderful miracle. And that's all I'm going to say.
All right. Well, keep us hanging, Anne. All right. And that is theaters
in theaters, yes. Yeah.
All right.
Theaters.
All right. Now listen, I'm going to tell you, I have not watched Murders in the Building, but the trailer for this year is sucking me in.
Oh, Candace. All right. You've got 3 years to catch up on before you start season 4. So it's great. It's Selena Gomez. It's Martin Short and Steve Martin. What a trio they are. The boys, I think of them as boys because I used to interview them a lot way back when. And so they live in this fabulous building. And in season 1, they solved a murder. And then they thought, well, this is easy. Let's solve murders, but only murders in our building. So that's the premise of it. Now their friend Zaz has disappeared. They haven't heard from her in several days, which is unusual. But Steve Martin's character is woken up by a train whistle from an old Western on TV, Once Upon a Time in the West. And he takes that as a sign because Zaz, who's missing, was constantly whistling. So it's very funny. It's so beautifully written, and it's witty and adult, and I just can't sing his praises high enough. So they make a discovery, and things get crazy from then on. And it turns out, I can't tell you anymore. I'm sorry. It's such a delicious mystery, and they have to solve it. So I'm dying to tell you more, but I can't.
I'm going to tell you why this season in particular, though, has made me want to go back now and start at the beginning and get it. It's because seeing Eugene Levy on the show.
Yeah.
I just adore him. I adore him.
I know,
so
right?
I can't wait to see that.
It's that face. And he's been making us laugh forever, but it's that wonderful face.
Yeah. So that's out this week?
Yeah.
Okay. And where can we catch it, Anne?
It's Hulu.
All right. Fantastic. All right, Anne, you will be back next week with a lot more. And thank you so much for all of our new entertainment this week.
Yay. And I'm so glad you're going to get on to Only Murders in the Building. Atta girl, Candace.
See you next week, Anne.
All righty. Bye.
Spending time outdoors is more important than ever for our physical and mental well-being. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Mary Anne Ivison, the host of the podcast, Let's Take This Outside. Mary Anne is an aspiring outdoor athlete and nature lover who speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about their connection to nature and how it affects their performance and everyday life. We're going to talk how that affects you as well today. Welcome to the show, Mary Anne.
Thanks, Candace. Honestly, it's my favorite topic, so I'm happy to chat about it.
It's, you know what? I think it's so crucial, and not enough of us are getting outside. So what inspired you to start your podcast, Let's Take This Outside?
So it's a bit of a long story, but I've always loved the outdoors. However, I lost my job in 2021. I was in radio for like 13 years. I got into voice acting, and our mutual friend, Matt Kundle, who runs a podcast network called Sound Off, he's like, you need to start a podcast. You need to start a podcast. I'm like, the only way to start a podcast, if it was something I could do for a long time, something that I know I could talk to many people about, that I was really genuinely passionate about. And Let's Take This Outside, which I think is one of the best titles of a podcast ever. I'm also very, humble about that.
I'm gonna argue and say I think what she said is personally, but okay well.
Okay, we both have amazing titles for podcasts. I will say that. But it was just so easy to doing a podcast. Both you and I know is extremely difficult and takes long. It's a lot of work, but it's so easy for me when I'm doing the interviews with athletes or outdoor professionals or scientists, when I'm in it and I'm releasing the episode and hearing it after, and the knowledge that I can share with my audience, that's where I get the feeling from, is like, okay, I want to make sure that people are connecting to nature and learning about it and how to recreate responsibly and in a way that we're taking care of nature.
And I think it's important, that you're also genuinely curious in the subject matter. So were you always an outdoor enthusiast, or was this something you had to work on?
It evolved over time. I grew up on a farm in Southern Ontario. So I always played outside. We had, acres and acres of farmland to play. And I played in the bush. We had tree houses. So like playing in dirt is from birth, right? That's where I come from. But my love of like hiking and nature and like outdoor recreating really came from my first visit to the Rocky Mountains in my early 20s. So over 10 years ago, and fell in love with it. My sister lived in Canmore, Alberta. And so I go once or twice a year ever since. And the Rocky Mountains, I would say, are like one of the most exquisite places in the world, right? So the fact that we have that in our country is amazing. And then I moved to Ottawa about 10 years ago. I started hiking in Gatineau Park. And then it's a community here. So then you start, you buy cross-country skis. And then you're like, oh, I bought a pandemic bike and now I'm cycling. I just started open water swimming this year. And so now I can enjoy Gatineau Park in this area and in the water, on the road, on the trails. So it's kind of evolved really aggressively, especially since I moved to Ottawa, because we're so lucky here with, with the playground that we have. But I think the community has a lot to do with it, and other people lifting you up and encouraging you. But I would say it's evolved over time, and now it's an obsession and a bit of an addiction.
So we want to encourage other people to get addicted to this outside, being outside and the benefits that it can have. Do you ever talk about what we lose when we spend so much time indoors, and then maybe what we gain when we start connecting with nature?
So this is a great question, because so many of my guests on my podcast, especially elite athletes, say they really notice their mood drops only when they haven't been outside or they've been training inside for a few too many days, right? Especially, I talked to a cyclist once who was talking about I wasn't in a great mood. It was the middle of winter and realized, I've been doing all my training indoors. So they more notice when they're inside and they're getting a little grouchy. And I feel the same way too. When I've been inside for too many days, work gets heavy, it really stands out. But we have so much science now proving spending time in nature and in green space does wonders for our mental health. You don't have to have crazy trails. We have so much green space in Canada, no matter where you are. It's been proven that it reduces stress, anxiety, depression, boosts heart health, improves memory, supports longevity, enhances our sleep. Getting sun is great for our circadian rhythm too, and sleeping well. And honestly, when we're in nature and when we're in nature with others, we are more likely to authentically connect with other people, right? We're more likely to have our phones away. We're on a trail, you're just walking your dog with your friend. You're more likely to have these authentic conversations when you're outdoors with other people that you love.
It's so true. And, one of the things too is I think people have to start, I guess I want to say lying to themselves, but honestly, I did it because I used to hate winter. I really hated winter. And every year I would go through this, oh God, it's coming. And I would just, despise it. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm not going anywhere, and neither is Canada. This is just staying this way. So I started.
It's getting a little warmer depending where you are, but yeah.
So I started to say, I love winter. I didn't really mean it in the beginning.
Yeah.
But now I actually do love winter. I get out skiing. I get out,
good.
walking in the winter, skating. I do actually love the outdoors now. Have you ever had to do that to yourself? Sort of convince yourself that you like doing something?
If the weather is if it's really cold, there's a saying about if there's never bad weather, just bad layering.
Yeah.
I don't think that's genuinely true. To be honest, for example, cross-country ski season, I get really sweaty and then I get really cold, more likely to get frostbite. Maybe I just need to learn to layer better. I don't know. If it was pouring like it did in Ottawa last week when we got 70 or 80 millimeters of rain, not my idea of fun. Definitely I've had times where I'm okay, you gotta work yourself up. The motivation isn't always 100% there. No.
Could you share some insights or stories from any of your podcast guests about how nature has positively impacted their performances and everyday lives?
So Megan J. Ward, she is an incredible travel writer from Banff. She grew up in Ottawa. She moved to the Rocky Mountains, I think, when she was in her late teens, early 20s. And living in the mountains changed her whole life. She met her husband there. He's a nature photographer. And now, she fell in love with nature. Her whole life changed in so many ways, even from a religious standpoint. And now they have kids and they're showing it's the full circle of life. And now they're showing their kids nature and trying to travel with their kids. Lee McAdams, she writes one of the biggest travel blogs in Canada called Hike, Bike, Travel. She lives and breathes adventure, not only in Canada, but across the world. And she's able to inspire others too. This is so cool. And hopefully maybe you could chat with her. Her name's Dr. Melissa Lem. She started something called Par Prescriptions.
Kate, she's been on my show.
Yeah. She's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Where doctors can actually prescribe nature to patients. Ray Zahab, he's a local, but he's, a sensation. He's an elite athlete, explorer, ultra distance runner. He changed his life around. I think he used to smoke. I think he had not a great healthy lifestyle. And now he took up running and now he runs across deserts. He does expeditions in the Arctic. He just went through cancer and beat cancer. And now I see him, running. And like, I think even through his treatments, when he was feeling good, he was in nature in Gatineau Park running and healing. So I think I need to catch up with him on that and how that attributed, but just a wild story.
So given all of that, then, do you have any sort of practical tips for those who want to start incorporating more outdoor activities into their daily routine, but don't know where to start?
We've kind of chatted about it already, but, we have so much green space in Canada. It doesn't have to be like this crazy mountainous region. We have green space all over the place, even if it's your local park or local trail, right? Quick walks in the morning, break up the day at lunch, go for a quick walk around the block. In the summer, taking your bike down to the beach or grabbing ice cream with friends versus driving. In the winter, it's the hardest, but, snowshoes, cross-country skiing, getting some crampons so you're not bailing on ice, layering properly. I cannot stress enough getting crampons for walks in the winter because it's scary. It's scary to walk sometimes with icy conditions, snowy conditions. So I'd highly recommend just getting some crampons. I think you can buy them at like Canadian Tire, right? And just so it's healthier so it's safer that you get outside in the winter, right?
How has your connection to nature evolved since starting the podcast? Have you become even more of an outdoor enthusiast?
Oh, I'm more obsessed than ever. When I speak to others who appreciate nature as much as I do, or even more than me, then my connection grows stronger, right? Like I learn something from every single one of my guests, whether it's a climate scientist, or an author, or like Multisport Canada. They convinced me to do my first multi-sport event this summer. I did a swim bike, and now it's something that I'm like, oh, I want to do like a full triathlon next year. So that personally affected me and affected my training this year, right? Directly. Author Christine Yu, she taught me about the lack of research on women in sport. That blew my mind, and how little women have been researched when it comes to sports and nutrition. It's wild. Mike Shorman, he taught me about like resiliency after being the first person with a disability to cross all 5 Great Lakes. So I'm like, if Mike can do that, if this man who has this terrible disease can do this, like if I'm a little grumpy and don't want to do this, no, I can, right? It just makes me a better person to talk to these people who are these people are incredible athletes and incredible at what they do.
What do you have planned next for Let's Take This Outside?
So I took a little break in the summer, but I have so many episodes coming out in the fall. Paul Ziska, who is one of the biggest nature photographers in Canada. I have a new episode with him. I'm doing an episode on Grossmore National Park with Parks Canada, which I'm really excited about. I have a lot of great stuff coming out in the fall, which I'm still trying to make sense of at this point. So.
Well, I want people to be able to connect with you, Mary Anne, find the podcast, maybe converse with you on social media. Where are the best places for them to do all that?
Yeah, let's take this outside.ca has all my links. Mary Anne Ivison, I'm sure it'll be in the show notes, on social media. Yeah, I'm on most social media platforms, on Instagram, but let's take this outside.ca is the best place.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today, Mary Anne.
Thanks, Candace.
We've all been there. Your teen is down in the dumps, and as their parent, it hurts you to see them hurting. So you reach into your bag of tricks and bring out classics like, come on, buddy, turn that frown upside down, or you have so much to be grateful for. But instead of helping, it seems to make things worse. Aly Pain, What She Said's expert on parenting teens, is here to help us navigate the tricky waters of what she calls pompom parenting and offers some advice on how to really connect with your teen during those tough moments. Welcome back to the show, Aly.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with the concept of pom-pom parenting. Can you explain what this is and why, despite our best intentions, it can backfire, especially with teens?
Sure. So it's our loving intention to cheerlead. You know, we want our children to have a great experience of life. And so we cheerlead them as a way of showing love and care for their feelings. And it backfires because what it turns into is convincing your teen not to feel the way they feel because somehow what they feel is wrong. And that escalates badly.
So yeah, well, dismissing a teen's emotions with overly, especially, I mean, anybody's emotions really, with overly positive responses can make them feel unheard. So what are some signs that we might be unintentionally doing this, and how can we approach these situations differently?
So the key sign, especially for our generation, Gen X, Gen Y, or Gen Z, that was we were raised where positivity was the only emotions allowed. So I have a lot of compassion for that. I was raised in that too. And so the biggest signal is if your teenager is having a feeling or obsessing about something negative because they're very negative oriented in their minds, and you feel uncomfortable. If you feel uncomfortable with their discomfort, that is a signal that is your work, not theirs. Okay. And again, that's common because you love them. And so you don't want them to be sad. And I think also because we were not raised having a large capacity for challenging emotions because we weren't allowed them. There's a fear story that says if your teenager feels sad or negative, that all of a sudden we're catastrophizing that into, oh my gosh, now they're going to be depressed and anxious, or they're going to like self-harm. And we go down this terrible path when they're just expressing an emotion. So the way to do it differently is simply get curious about their emotion, because the reality is all emotions are true, all of them. And 100% of behavior is driven by emotion. So suppressing that emotion is much worse than simply being curious about it. It's like taking the lid off a boiling pot. You're allowing the boil to come down. Your perception that allowing or being curious about that feeling is going to make it worse is actually completely the opposite of what's going to happen. It helps them to regulate, because your teenager's brain cannot regulate on their own. So being curious about the feeling, using empathetic, tell me more about that, or, oh, that seems tough. Wow, that's hard. What's that like for you? Zero judgment, allow it. They regulate, they process, and come down.
I just want to pause here for a second. I'm giggling a little about this because this is such a Gen X description. You suppress your emotions. We do not discuss these things. Feelings? What are feelings? No. So, I think really the work is on the parents' part, because I think the kids have it right. They are, using their emotions and understanding and developing emotional intelligence. I think something a lot of Gen X parents really struggle with. So we also feel this strong urge to sort of fix our teens' problems to make them feel better instantly. So what strategies can parents use to resist this urge? Because, oh gosh, I know I did it. And instead foster a more supportive and validating environment for them without maybe pushing them further into despair, right? We don't want to push them too far.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I love that. Resist the fix. And again, to your point, there is a lot of, I'm going to say, unhealthy validation as a parent that also we were raised in this construct, that as we can fix our child's emotions, or specifically flip them from a challenging emotional state to a more pleasurable state, you are a better parent. And I'm going to say that's a big fat lie, because what you can't, you are not responsible for, nor can you control their feelings. And if you believe that again, I put myself in this boat, comes from a position of insecurity, which also egotism. And again, it's what you were taught. So what you're doing in asking your teenager to not have a challenging emotion because it challenges you, so they should have a pleasurable feeling, but you're twisting that into, I'm a good parent because I could cheer them up. What's actually happening is you're asking them to deny, abandon, or suppress that feeling. And we all know what happens in a mental health crisis now with an entire generation of people who have suppressed emotions. So ways to do that again is, first of all, this is part of your journey, and it was part of mine. And as you said, part of yours. This was a construct we were raised in, we now know is quite unhealthy from a mental health perspective. And so all emotions are human. All emotions are normal. Simply expressing them, of course, not with name calling or swearing or anything like that. No. But simply expressing anger or frustration or sorrow, melancholy, sadness, it is normal. So I want you to normalize challenging feelings for your teenager. So one of the ways you can do that, and this is actually really critical, talk about your own.
Interesting.
You see, I think as parents, we have this thing, like, you want your teenager to see you as the model, the thing they should represent, right? The problem is it's not realistic, because your teenagers, yeah, but I feel this over here, like I feel this sadness over here, but you're saying I should only feel this. So there's a giant chasm of disconnect there that lowers safety and trust, and then they hide more emotions, because obviously they feel guilty sharing those emotions because they make you so uncomfortable. So what I'm asking you to do is, instead of, fix their fear or fix their frustration, is look at yourself, and that your value is actually being curious with them to help them regulate, because they can't do that themselves. It's called co-regulation, non-judgmental, open-ended questions, or statements. Wow, that sounds hard. I'm sorry that happened for you today. Oh, that would be disappointing. It's just statements like that. When you offer fixing and advice, that is about you and reaching a perceived value in yourself, and or squelching a discomfort emotion. So you need to be comfortable with the full range of emotions. And that means, I used to, as my teen was expressing something negative, because I could feel myself getting tense, I would breathe in, because when I was breathing in, I couldn't talk. I'd breathe in. And I would do it like calmly, or like subtly, so they couldn't see me taking a deep breath. So breathing is a great way. Also journaling your own emotions, and then helping your teen to journal theirs. So if you have a frustrating day, come home and say, I was so frustrated today, and I felt this, and this is what happened, and this is what I went and did. I went for a walk around the block before I went into that meeting, or I'm going to go for a walk right now because I want to be present. So you're showing them you're normal, you're human, you have a full range of emotion, and that's okay. And you're showing them healthy coping techniques, so they learn to be okay with those emotions rather than be afraid of those emotions.
One of the things I started to ask my teens later on, it took me a while to learn this, was to ask them what they wanted from me or needed from me in that moment. So I would say, do you want my advice, or do you want me to listen? And, and then I would have to respect that answer. And as much as I would want to jump in with advice, if they said, listen, that's what I did.
And that is so wonderful. Asking permission builds respect, and honoring their answer amplifies that respect tenfold. Because I will promise you, 90% of the time, your teenager is simply they're simply processing with you. They're increasing their emotional capacity by 4.5 times. That's just a little, 4.5 times. So they feel things viscerally, and they don't have the intellectual processing. That doesn't mean they're not allowed to feel it. It's a good thing they're sharing feelings with you. That means you're their safe person. Let them share it so they can regulate and enable and grow their own intellectual processing power to begin to filter those feelings. When you do it for them by giving advice and fixing, you disable that, and you send the message that says you're not capable to handle this feeling, nor are you capable to come up with an effective solution.
As always, Aly, great advice. And, kids are teens are heading back into school and into university, and it is going to be an emotional time. So this is a timely conversation, and I thank you for joining me. I want people to be able to reach you, of course, because you have written about this, and you're always around to offer advice and work with people. So where can they find you?
Best place is my website, alypain.com, ALYPAIN, or on socials at Aly Pain.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Aly.
Awesome. Thanks, Candice.
Bridgerton fans, draw near, because there's a new period drama for you to fall in love with. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Anne Radcliffe, a talented writer who has co-authored 3 books with Lynn Morrison, with many more planned across the series. We'll be discussing the dynamics of co-authoring a book series, the inspiration behind the Crown Jewels Regency mysteries, and what the future holds for the dynamic characters found within. Welcome to What She Said, Anne.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Co-authoring a book must be a really unique experience. So can you tell us what it's like to co-author a book with someone and how that process works for you and Lynn?
Okay, so the original story about how this happened is like Lynn's favorite. She basically showed up in my DMs in February, and she's like, "Have you watched Bridgerton yet?" And I said, "No, I have not read or watched Bridgerton on Netflix." She's like, "Do that because we're writing a book." And I was like, "Okay." So that's how we sort of got into it. Lynn and I have been close friends for a lot of years. We got together when we were both blogging. So it's been, 10 years now. And I think that close friendship is something that's really important when co-authoring, because otherwise you have to worry about like feelings getting hurt and stuff. If you can't be honest with one another, it makes for a little bit of an awkward relationship. So, but it's been great fun.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back on the timeline here. When did she originally message you?
This February. So, or maybe
Okay,
right
so we're in, it's worth noting, we're in July. I want people to really just like, if in case they're listening to this later on podcast, this was discussed in February and we're in July. That is really, really quick.
Yes. But that is another benefit to co-writing. We have been plotting and spitting out like way faster. So, our goal was to like, put together these first 3 books and rapid release them and try to take advantage of people who have finished Bridgerton season 3 and they're like, I don't know what to do to get my Bridgerton.
Well, they have until 2026 to wait for the next one of that for the show anyway. So when you're co-authoring, is it a little like improv? Do you ever just say, let's see, leave it and then say, let's see where Lynn takes it? Or does she do the same to see where you're going to take it?
Yes, actually. So we tried this once before in urban fantasy. As you know, that series kind of went to the side a little bit, but that was exactly how we wrote that one book. And we would basically just try to surprise one another. If you saw The Wandering Witch, yes, there was one scene where she had the guy show up in the golf cart and she handed it over to me. She's like, next chapter is yours. And I'm like, okay. So we're doing a chase in a golf cart.
It's fiction. You can do whatever you would like, obviously.
You can.
So but writing though a period drama must present some challenges. So how much, I guess research did you have to do into the period you're writing about?
Quite a bit. Lynn has done period dramas before, so she's at least a little bit familiar with that. And the other thing is we're writing in British English because it's set in Regency, England, and all that. So all of those conventions, I had to update myself on the correct spelling of so many things and how they capitalize and some of the idioms of the day, like, to be cast beyond the pale and stuff like that. We got a Regency editor to give us a hand for the first book just to make sure that we were hitting the right notes. But yes, we spent a significant amount of time doing research into the language and stuff like that, just so kind of knew what we were talking about.
How far do you envision taking this series?
So the original plan was we were going to give each pair of characters their own trilogy, with the, option, I guess, to do more. We can either circle back and give them each another trilogy if we feel like, or standalone books. Actually, book 4 in the current one. So the main characters are Roland and Grace. We're giving them a 4th book, a Christmas book that's coming out in December 1st, if I remember correctly. But after that, we're planning on jumping to another pair of characters that people have already met in this series, and they're going to get their 3. They're going to get their love story. And then we move on to yet another character that we've already met in series, the first trilogy, and we get to see him too.
What are some of the challenges and rewards of writing this series in 2 different locations?
So obviously one of the challenges is how do we communicate in real time? So people might be interested to note that we are co-writing this in a Google Doc. And the reason for that is because we can each see each other writing in real time. And so we can follow along. And then we've been talking, I guess, on Discord, which is kind of like Skype or Slack or any one of those programs. So we call each other and we're on calls for like 2 hours a day. I get on right at 8 o'clock in the morning after school drop off, and she writes in the afternoon for her. And that's a good overlap time for the two of us.
Did either of you ever, I want to just ask quickly, did either of you have experience in publishing? Because this February to July timeline is sitting on my brain. You must have had some sort of knowledge of how the industry works to be able to come to market so quickly and develop these stories.
Lynn has been in the industry for a couple of years now. And so you can find Lynn Morrison and her 1920 series online, and some of her other series too, while she was dabbling in paranormal women's fiction and other stuff. But currently right now, her big series is a 1920s one. And she self-publishes on Kindle Unlimited, and through Amazon. So she's familiar with that space, and she has been taking the reins and all that, and has been teaching me as we go along.
So do you have any advice then for people listening who may be aspiring authors and are looking to either write a book on their own or perhaps find a co-author?
Yeah. My first advice would be to find a community, because there is so much useful information out there. And other things that people have like tried and failed at. You can find people depending on, what your goals are. Like if you have a certain story, but you really want to make money or you want to do that, they can give you advice on everything from covers to how to write to market to what tools are best. Basically find a friend first, and then, as you experiment with that, then find a co-author. You might find both.
All right, excellent. So, Anne, where can people find the books, I should say? How can they keep up with you and Lynn?
Okay, so if you're subscribed to Kindle Unlimited and enjoying books there, you can find the entire Crown Jewels Regency mystery series there, including The Missing Diamond, which is the first book, right there with your Kindle Unlimited subscription. Otherwise, you can order a paperback or buy the ebook right there online on Amazon.
All right, fantastic. Anne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great fun.
If today's podcast resonated with you, spread the word and share the inspiration. Don't forget to hit subscribe on What She Said across your favorite podcast platforms. Crave more? Join my vibrant community by signing up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com, and let's get social on Facebook, Instagram, and X at What She Said Talk. Dive into my world a little deeper on TikTok and Threads at Candace Said. And for those who love the airwaves, catch me weekly on 105.9 The Region, Blast the Radio, and 107.7 Pulse FM. Until next time, keep making waves, and remember, your voice matters.
Come on, let's go to the Blue Hotel. I wanna live at the Blue Hotel.
The podcast that goes everywhere the imagination dares. It's for the open-minded, the pleasure seeker. It's Jeff Woods with the new podcast about relationships and sexuality, theme-based with special guests, the Blue Hotel Hotline, and every episode climaxes with an adult bedtime story. Get a room and listen in at the Blue Hotel. Begins Friday, September 23rd.
Emily Roger, and I host a leadership show called The Boiling Point with my co-host, Dave Vale. Together, we sit down with trailblazing entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and movement makers who are driving meaningful change in our world. The show is all about exploring the lives and perspectives of leaders who are making a difference. Join us for insightful conversations that challenge the status quo, spark new ideas, and inspire you to take action. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or at boilingpointpodcast.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.